Hi, this is Carrie Ann Reed Brown, and this is Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast. Everyone, welcome to another episode of Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast. I'm excited that you're listening. I'm glad you're going to get a little peek of a conversation with someone who I know, as we would say in the Caribbean, donkey years now. But anyway, I don't want to take away anything from my guest today, who is Mark Anthony Hill, artist. Mark, welcome to the show. How are you doing this morning?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, I'm okay. I'm doing great.
Good.
Do better.
All right. That's how we're working on, right? Trying to get better. So, Mark, tell the community, the people, a little bit about who you are, Caribbean country you represent, and all that good stuff.
Well, my name is Mark Anthony Hill. I'm originally from Jamaica, fully bred. Came to live in the United States in 2007. And I am just trying to explore and to find my better half or my better side, trying to get a hold of the doppelganger, as we would call it. And presently, I'm now in New York doing a host of things where art, what we call contemporary art, is concerned. So we are trying to add a little bit more value to ourselves and to get our creative talent noticed in this world.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the type of art you do and specifically the art that's on display right now in New York.
Well, the type of art I am doing right now, I really don't like to label, but we have to label in order to understand difference.
Yeah.
And I would have to go in depth, maybe a minute worth of explanation. Some people call it Cubism. Some people call it Africanism, but it is a mixture of both. I really don't give it a name. I allow the onlooker to give it a name, whatever they choose. But really and truly, I was more caught up in the Eurocentric type of thinking because that was how we were taught. And once I shed that old self, I chose to get involved with studying a little bit more European art and African art. And what I grew to understand was the Europeans were heavily influenced by African art, but they didn't give it any credit because they deemed it as primitive. But it was from African art that we know of a particular art form that was created or that was stolen by Pablo Picasso. We know it now as Cubism, but it is really and truly African art. So what I'm doing now is merging the two together, African art along with Eurocentric art. So I really and truly don't have a name for it. I wanted to call it Marxism, but that may sound a little bit too aloof. So I'm leaving it for the onlookers to deal with that or to consider it where they want to put it. So now we are in New York and we are doing the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance. The movement that took place back in 1900 up until around 1946, where the intellect of Black people was brought to the forefront of the world. And the movement that took place with the Harlem Renaissance, people like Marcus Garvey, Claude McKay, W.E.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, the great Zora Neale Hurston, and quite a few others, Alain Locke. So it was a vibrant time. So I'm just trying to paint the vibrancy of what it was back then, rather than to paint the individual who created the movement itself. Because we all know the movement is always greater than the individual.
Yes.
Right. So I'm just doing that now to show some form of honor and, as Coffee would said, gratitude.
Yeah.
In terms of what our foreparents had in store for us and where we are now. So it is just basically some form of retrospection and introspection in terms of the movement and where we are now as Black people.
All right. So Mark, you talked about the arts. I'm excited about the work that you're doing. And, in show notes, I'll put some pictures of it. But, everybody, I know Mark long time, about 20 odd years now, I know Mark. So Mark, really, and boy, how me for us, like how you get to this point, because everybody have to understand when I lived in Jamaica, Mobi specifically, I know Mark, and we used to hang out on Saturdays, and then separately, I remember I know your aunt and your cousins, we went to church together. And so we go way back. And I know Mark as the baller, the footballer who scored big goal, the Casta Cup, for Cornwall College. And so Mark, what's the transition from being a baller to now being the artist? Let's talk a little bit about the transition from Cornwall College superstar footballer to you being an artist, talking about the shedding of old self and reflection. Like, let's talk about that, because a whole heap to unpack right there. So
right. So while I was playing football in high school, that was just another side of me. But I started playing football very late in life. I could play it, I knew I could, but the love for it wasn't there because I was always into art. But not the painting side of it. I recognized that I was very creative from the age of, let us say, 10. So did it in primary school, and the teacher was always upset. Oh, you're always creating some stuff, and you're writing this way, because I was always creating some different form of joining up, or what we would call scripts. And she would, oh, Mark, you're always doing that. So anyway, it went on to the point where she accepted it, and she said to me, you need to really pay attention to this creative side. But, they say hindsight is what makes us genius. And, I never understood what she was saying at the time. So when I passed my exam and I went to Cornwall, that was where I met upon this Rastafarian who was my art teacher. But he wasn't only teaching art. He was teaching everything: bio, chemistry, physics, life, reality. He just had that, what we would call exuberance about himself that was very contagious. So I fall in love more now because I'm recognizing that this is where I want to be. So the football didn't come in as yet until one day he said to me, look, I saw you playing on the field during physical education, and you really do have a talent to play, and I think you should consider it. It's not going to take away from your art, but you should consider it, because that is just a gift that God blessed you with as well. You're just one of the few that have more than one talent. So I said, okay, cool. And I went and, we played the football for a while, and I achieved a lot out of it, because after school, then I went into the national program where I was a part of the national under 23 youth program. But then it got boring, and my high school coach came to me and said to me, listen, how would you like to do the bobsled? And I'm
bobsled.
Like, what the hell is a bobsled? And he said to me, have you ever heard of Cool Runnings? And I was like, what the hell is Cool Runnings? I've never seen it. But I never knew that Cool Runnings was one of the biggest comedy about the Jamaican bobsled team, because at the time, I think Free Willy was number one at the box office, and Cool Runnings overtook it. So I had to go to the video store, rent a video cassette, and I'm watching Cool Runnings, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to go to these cold countries on this ice. And cut a long story short, I went back to him and I was like, okay, I'm ready to do it. So I wasn't aware of it, but it is funny how we can move so unconscious in our own conscious state, because all these potential, it was there, but I never recognized it. So went to Europe, first time traveling, and I recognized that, okay, life is really a challenge. It was very challenging, but I understood that there is something about comfort that I don't like. And I really and truly believe that comfort can really hold a person back. It prevents them from becoming their better self, because I've always viewed individuals as an onion with different layers, but you have to be willing to push yourself through the tribulation and the uncomfortableness to go deep inside yourself to find that side of you that you have never known for a fact that you have.
Yeah.
So
stretching is not comfortable. It like it's a comfort. When you have to step outside your comfort zone, it's an unknown, and we like the known. We
right,
really we like the known, so we not stretch and we not grow because we not like to take risk.
right, so yeah. So after that, I started bobsledding in 1999. I started training in 1998. Then in 1999, I went away and I was doing some training in Austria, in Norway, and I had a major accident there in Norway. The sled overturned with us, and it 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 created a lot of facial damage to me, and yeah, I was in surgery for almost 8 hours.
Wow.
Over 350 stitches to the face, and it was a moment of, okay, how do I maneuver now? Do I go back or do I run away? So I decided that I'm not going to run away because it's fear, and in order to defeat the fear, I will have to confront it. So I confronted it and I went back, and I became better at it and better at it, I recognized that I was getting even more better. But then again, it got monotonous, the traveling, because I was traveling for like 10 years, living out of suitcase here and there, all over in Europe. Got monotonous. I got tired of it, so I said, no, 2006, I'm done. The last. Came to United States in 2007. And while I was here, I was still painting, but no one was seeing the work. So I got introduced to do a group exhibition in Boca Raton in South Florida. Now, mind you, these people have not seen the work. They have never seen me in action where painting is concerned. So they are basically oblivious. And the curator of the exhibition asked the person who told me about the exhibition, have you ever seen his work? And they were like, no. No, they asked to see the work. I sent the works over to them and they called for a meeting. And they were like, Mark, listen, we can't use you in this exhibition. And I was like, okay, why? Because I take things at face value. I don't add things to things. I don't do that because I can be wrong and it may be 100 miles away from what I'm thinking. So I said to the person, okay, why would you not have me a part of this exhibition? And she said to me, number one, you're from Jamaica. That's number one. Number two, you're unorthodox in your style. And number three, you're a Jamaican bobsledder. We have invested heavily in our artists. So for us to put you on the show, the power that you're coming with, you're not only going to subdue our artists, but you are going to get all the attention. And we can't afford that, which was honest. I respected her honesty because I understood it's a business. And I took it and I said, okay, the political feel in this art world is a little bit different. So I'm going to break away from it and let it rest for a little while until I am into the right field where I'm getting in contact with the right person to do things in the art world politically, because art is very political. So I stopped for like 6 years or 7 years, but I was still fooling around, not doing it big time. And then something else happened. I was working, but this time I was working with a particular hospital transporting organs. So while I'm doing that, I'm saying to myself, oh wow, I can't live in a house doing this because I was constantly on the road. So I bought myself a van and I transformed the van into a mobile home because I was constantly on the road, going to the research centers, delivering this, delivering that, and what have you. So I recognized that, okay, I need to get back into painting. But how am I going to do it? Because, I'm strapped for time. But I have to make it work because, again, I don't like to feel comfortable. It just doesn't feel right, comfort, for some apparent reason. And a lawyer friend of mine called me and he was like, hey, Mark, how would you like to start painting again? I was like, okay, cool, but let me think about it. And he kept on calling and he just wouldn't give up. He kept on calling and calling and calling and calling and calling. And one day he said to me, hey, listen, this is what I wanted to do. I need you to go to Home Depot and take everything that you need and have them call me. I'm going to set up an account immediately and I'm going to pay for the materials that you need. Right there and then I know I was in. There is no more backing out. So he caught me, and it took off from there. So the works were getting done, but now, what am I going to do with all these works? I don't know. So I called into New York City and I spoke with a particular person, and he was saying, well, to get our spot in order to host your exhibition, it's going to cost $12,000. I was like, oh, wow, I don't have $12,000, but I need to get, right, but I need to get that $12,000. So guess what? I decided that I was just going to live on the road. I sat and I figured it out. I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to join the gym. I'm going to pay $10 a month. This is where I'm going to brush my teeth. This is where I'm going to have a shower, and I'm going to live on the road in my van because I need to save this money to get this exhibition. And I did it. It took me 6 months to allocate all that money. Then I called back the person and I said, I'm ready. And that was in 2017. My first solo exhibition was 2017, you know, but I knew I had that drive just to get in that untouched part of me that is there and it is not awakened. So I had to do something in order to get it out. But I had to push myself as well, you know, self-motivation, intrinsically. So I did it.
May I have to stop you right there, sir? Because as you're going through the story, I want you to tell this. I'm glad you're telling the story because up here know it's me right? But I just need to stop you right there, so because there's this thing you keep talking about, which I think is very important, and I want you to think about comfort. You talk about it, and I know what it is. Another word is complacency, right? And back in the day, guess what they would have called you? You can't stand study, you know, you can't stay still.
Yeah.
Because there's this thing, and it's very hard to explain to people who have not experienced it, when there's this thing about you can't sit in a place because you know you're supposed to be doing something. So it always seems like you're all over the place and distracted. Now, what do you think was part of your childhood that encouraged this ability to be okay with not being comfortable, and to, most importantly, be okay with not, you talked about label and, you know, like labels, but labels is important for understanding. But when you talk about Jamaican culture as a whole, you know, the braggadocio of the culture, we love it, but it also, you know what it is. You're a big baller, you're a college man, Cornwall College, those. So being Jamaican, being, you know, Cornwall College, D Cup, all of these things carry a title. And, you know, you just tell me, say, you're in the gym, so you can live on the road there, you can brush your teeth and beard. And, you know, so you have to be in a place where you shed these titles, or this, what may you call this appearance, or what you should be, or all of these things. It's like you resist that. So how are you able to be okay with that, considering your peers? Because I don't know about anybody else who was going to do all of this. So what about your childhood, if anything, what about it really had this influence to say, you know what, music, play a ball, but you know, for you to admit, I'm never really into it like that. I mean, how can you say that? Football a king. So, you know, and then you left football, go and play. I mean, me can't hear this story. Spoon a madman. Oh, go now way in a which
yes.
You know, so tell me a little bit about that, because the story is amazing, but what's in your life, your childhood, and nurtured that ability to say, yeah, okay, me like art. Was it the art teacher and how he moved that inspired you, influenced you? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, okay, so I remember as far back as maybe 7 years old. That is how far I can go back, you know. And I think there is a reason for that, because they say children don't forget at age 7. They really don't forget as long as they reach age 7, moving up. So I think that side of me was always there, but there was no one around me who could put it in perspective for me to understand what it was really. Because I can recall I used to have cousins who used to say to me, "You're always doing so much things. why can't you stick to one thing? And I remember at one point in time, an aunt of mine said to me, a man of many trades is the master of none. And these are some of the narratives that we really and truly have to be careful of how we bestowed those things upon our children, because
we internalize them, and then they're on autopilot, because we talk about, how many times, seen and be seen and not heard, or speak when you're like you internalize these things, and the brain takes over, and you don't have to think about it. The brain just say, oh, that's the message, okay, boom, autopilot. You said it perfectly. We move unconsciously in our conscious state.
Yes.
Yeah. So even in our conscious state, we move unconsciously based on those cues that we were given as children.
Yeah, because what that is doing, what that was doing at the time, now that I can put it in perspective, that means I should kill my limitless possibilities and just focus on one thing, which is not correct, because when I'm on the road driving, there are so many things I have to be focusing on in order not to meet in an accident or to hit somebody or to run the light, or you get what I'm getting. So when I went to Cornwall College, that was where the art teacher became that molding factor, because what he could do very well, he mastered the art of breaking things down in theory. So he would not only say to me, 1 + 1 is 2. He would break it down and tell me why 1 + 1 becomes 2. So the teaching was very different. It was totally different. And that was where my confidence began to metastasize and grow and grow. And he would say to me, don't get comfortable. It prevents growth. Don't get comfortable. Not because you're good at what you're doing, always practice. Don't just accept it for what it is. Always practice. And as soon as you have mastered that goal, you moved on to another thing, because that job is done. He was the only one at the time speaking to me like that. So my level was already 30 years old at age 12. Because my friends weren't in art. They weren't around him. So my mentality was really and truly different, to the point where I was not going to project my mentality on them. It is up to them to really get to understand, okay, this is where Mark is at mentally. Do I want to go there, or do I not want to go there? And they choose not to for whatsoever reason, which is okay. You know what I'm saying? It's no big deal. I am where I'm at now, and I can always look back at it in what we would call some form of sequential fashion, to say, okay, this happened at this time, this happened at this time. So the art teacher really and truly played his part in creating that perfect ice got set when I was in his company. It just became like a match made in heaven. And that was when.
And it was also at a formidable stage, right? Because the experience with the art teacher that you have, a lot of people don't get to experience that until later in life. And by then it's harder to break some of the habits or the mindsets that you have from young, right? So he got you at a really, when you are still forming, your thoughts and your, so I think that was a really amazing. Now, my head myself, I should have that the art teacher, Alberta.
Yes, and another thing too. I mean, this was the only teacher who ever really said to me, saying, "Love me." And I'm sure it in so many ways. And really made me feel like, okay, because remember, my father wasn't around, so that love that I needed in terms of guidance and in terms of being that moral compass, it was the art teacher who was playing that role, because he always said to me, "You're going to be a force to reckon with your art, I wanted to believe that because I believed in you." So he was the one saying, who really pushed it in my head to say, "Look, I love you and I'm very proud of you." Because you don't know in a Jamaica, anytime we hear a next man tell a next man say him love him, we start think all type of things and it not really go the way we really want it to go. But that was when everything got the way how it all got formulated and things. It was in that realm. To this day we are still,
That was
good.
about to be my next question. Like, where's the art teacher right now? And
he's living now in Chester Castle because he retired from teaching in Cornwall College. Yeah, but he's doing his own thing. Beautiful soul. I don't know of anyone who have ever said anything bad about that teacher. He was so contagious. That man was so contagious to the point where you will not go to class. It is that good. Very contagious, and fair and honest. He's not going to spoil you. And he's not, if you're in the wrong, he's going to break it down to you. He was never one to embarrass in public. He pull you to the side and he'll say, this is what I think. You have really and truly put me in a position where I'm a bit shamed, but I still love you regardless. So next time, don't do it that way. Do it this way. So he became that corrective script. He was not only a teacher, he was everything. He was a father figure. He was a friend. Mr. Clark was everything. Clyde Clark was everything. I'm telling you, everything. He really molded my confidence in such a way I didn't have to question. It was that good.
That's the power of the influence of a really good teacher. And, and I think, him giving you this important nugget, comfort prevents growth. And I think a lot of times comfort can also mean that you're comfortable with the status quo, right? This is like we say, bala, you're supposed to have this bravado and y'all in a bungle and all of them things. Yes, you understand? And, that's part of the status quo, but you were able to say, you know what, this is enough for me. Me go stretch, because you went and you watched the video of the cool runnings and decide to take the leap and go Norway, and Norway probably cooler than over here in New York, and to move from football to bobsled, and even after your accident you decide that okay, I'm gonna go back and try it until you say, you know what, I've grown, I've practiced, and I've given it my all, and now it's time to move. So as a parent, right? How do you parent differently? Because I like to think, that my grandparents did the best with the tools they had available to them. So now that we know better, we have to do better. And I can admit that sometimes I don't always do it. Sometimes I catch myself, I behave like my mother. But how do you then teach your son a different way and give him the same canvas or freedom that Mr. Clark gave you?
Right. That's a very good question, It's a very good question, and it is a very interesting question. One of the first things I try to ensure in my son is to have confidence in his ability. I've always made sure of that. I don't kill his confidence nor his ability. Second, I don't shout at my child. I don't do it. And I don't beat. I have different methods in how I do things, because I'm saying to myself, if I have to constantly beat him every time he's doing something wrong, when will the beating end? So I had to go back in history and see how and where this all got created, where we use beating as this tool for correction. Some people do it. I don't have a problem with how they choose to parent. I personally don't go that route. And I remember there was this woman who said to me, you spare the rod and you spoil the child, which is a highly misquoted narrative, because nowhere in the Bible did it say that. Because we all know that the rod was used to guide the sheep. It's not used to inflict wound on the sheep. But also the rod is used to protect the sheep from the wolves.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to dig deep and said, okay, parenting is going to teach us more about ourselves
Ourselves, yeah.
than our children.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to do it? Then I start to ensure him that, listen, you mean a lot to me. You are my other half. You are a representation of me. You are my DNA. And you do mean a lot to me. And I love you. So I have to reassure him constantly that it is okay for a father to love his son. Because a father telling his son or his daughter that he loves them, it reassures their confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is needed. So I had to implement all those things. But there are times when I have to be stern. But also, number one priority for me is to be his friend. Is to be his friend. That is my number one priority. Because that is the relationship I want to have with him. A friend relationship where he is not scared to say or tell me anything.
Right there says somebody kiss them teeth. Me and them mother, me and them father.
Yeah, but as I've said to you, it is okay. We all parent differently. I'm speaking in terms of what works for me because I understand perpetual history. And that is the reason why we have to go back in history to see how did we reach here. A lot of us, we really don't want to go back, especially when it has to deal with introspection. It's troubling to go back. It's very troubling to face yourself introspectively and retrospectively. It's very hard. So I understand. I'm not upset when people say, oh, well, I'm me the father and I'm me the mother and I have to do. And I say, okay, cool. Because guess what happened? I can show you plenty of people who can just say to you, I'm a daughter that and I'm a son that. But there's no relationship.
Right. That is
That's
true.
all them can say. I'm a mother that and I'm a father that. And there is no relationship. If you ask them if they love them, parent them can't tell you. You know, most of us in Jamaica, we don't deal with love. What we deal with is survival.
Yeah.
That is our ecote in Jamaica. We deal with survival. We don't deal with love. So it is a problem for even when you talk to a little youth or a 12 and ask him if he love his father. And you look for yourself, I mean, I love man. So you can't be surprised that answers like that. Because love was not bestowed upon him when he was growing up, so he can't show it.
Right, and because love itself or the showing of love and affection was, then a sign of weakness and
exactly.
and that, by showing me love and showing me affection, would mean that you would see that and take advantage of me as a parent. But now that you're putting it in that perspective, definitely I lived with disciplinarians, my mother and my grandmother, right? But I experienced a type of love with my grandmother. And, my husband, Nico, keeps saying the man, them and the family spoil me because they showed me love. And I was like, no, they didn't spoil me because they didn't give me anything. But, after Emma tell me this so much years, I understood, no, and I can make it real based on what you're saying. They gave me so much love and confidence that I moved through my life as if this is just normal. This is what's supposed to happen, right? Because and that's speaking to a confidence that I wouldn't have labeled it confidence. It was just like, no, this not normal feel. Like, I don't know. And I think it's very important. And I also look at the juxtaposition against my brother. I don't think my brother and my father had the same relationship like I have with my father. Granted, I was older. So I keep telling this story where, in 1992, I was staying with my father because I live out a White House. And my father said, come put on your clothes. And that relationship, if you tell anybody, is like, a man and him son a flex them way. But that's why him flex with me. Come put on your clothes. And before you know it, me there sun splash. I take him, and he would talk and he would say certain things around me and have very conversations where I would feel like I'm our next big man and bridge in a talk and he make me know a road code, as them say, right?
Yeah.
And it's that love and that relationship he had, I can't say I don't remember him saying I love you because I'm pretty sure he did, but it was in that action of making me say like, oh, you're not a little girl. Like, you know what I mean? It was more like, come, all right, may I go par, may I go do this. I felt his love. So I think to your point, when it's a reflection of you, he wanted me to feel the type of love and protect me in a way that
Yes.
had nothing to do with him beating me. Because I say to this day, none of the men in my family ever disciplined me, ever. And it's like the rod itself wasn't necessarily a physical belt. It was the staff with the hook that pull you in if you're gone too far. You know?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So I love the way you say it, because it instantly it connects, you know, and it's like you said, you know, there are points in your life when you look at the sequence and somebody else makes meaning. So thanks to you to help me make meaning of that and the confidence.
Yeah, man.
But
we have to.
We have to, but as a culture, you know, it's very hard because the way our parents parented is also how for them parents. So my grandmother gets it from my great grandmother and so forth, right? So it's very hard to break that culture of how you parent a child. And I think for me, I had no choice but to parent my child differently, especially when I live in America. There's certain things you cannot do. But you also know that there were certain things that happened for you that you know can work with you and a child. Bottom line.
Right.
Because my son Ethan, you know, sometimes he said things, I said, you know, say if me fear age, I couldn't even respond to my mother like that. But I realized that I have to give him the confidence to be able to speak up for himself, because in a place where you go work and, you know, you respect authority to the point where you don't speak up for yourself, that's an issue.
Right.
And I think what you've just said kind of really puts a lot of stuff that we've talked about on this show in perspective, that we have to be mindful of our actions because they have lasting impact on, you know,
it does,
on ourselves, because, you know, and our kids. So, all right. So let's talk about it's just so many things here. All right. So you've had a Jamaican experience, you've had a European experience, and now you have a North American experience.
Yes.
Tell me how those experiences, so we hear how Mr. Clark and the Jamaican experience kind of shape you. Talk a little bit about the European experience, because not many of us get to live in Europe and the opportunities you had. So tell me a little bit more about the influence of living in Europe and how that has helped shaped you to be, or help you evolve to be the person you are today.
Well, okay. The Europeans are a bit more reserved. They are mannerable people and considerate. Now, I don't know if it is because, you know, the history of Europe is really war torn. You know, a lot of wars and
Crazy King and
right. You know, so they grow with a particular type of pride that is not enveloped in arrogance. So it's more like you more become a gentleman in Europe. You speak properly. You learn how to carry yourself accordingly. You dress differently. That is just something about Europe. You drink the finest wine. They teach you how to taste wine. They teach you how to really and truly be a part of what they would call the moral elites of society, how to conduct yourself in the real world. So that was really and truly the grooming point, and another form of confidence now got placed there, because my coach was from Norway, and he was like, no, Mark, you can't wear the jeans to go to this place. We're going to be meeting Prince Albert. You can't be wearing these jeans. And this man invited the entire bobsled team to his palace, and you can't be wearing that. You have to dress and look the part. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to have my tailor come over, and we're going to take your measurement, and we're going to put you in a fine suit. So it was really, because now that is giving you another thing to be like, okay, maybe I was in a particular environment too long. So how do I adapt to this change? But I was always willing to accept change. You know, in life, things prefer to stay still. And again, that comes back with being comfortable. So I was like, hey, listen, I like this movement. And I see where it has, it begins to have this influence of me becoming more manly, in terms of my attitude, in terms of conflict of resolution. You need to behave like a man. You don't need to be speaking aloud if you're having a a difference with someone. It was different, really and truly different. So when I went back to Jamaica, I was a totally different person at age 21 because I was traveling from I was 19. So we used to do all these long stretches in Europe, 6 months, and back to Jamaica. So when I went back, it was like, okay, it feels as if I've outgrown this place. Not physically, but mentally. I've outgrown this place. So this was good. Then America, oh my God. The first thing I recognized when I came into the United States was the high level of insecurity. Loaded. There's a lot of insecurity here. In the children, in the parents, in everything. There's a lot of insecurity. And a lot of defensive mechanism. Even when there is nothing in it. You can't look at a person without them asking, what are you looking at, man? You know, whatsoever you're looking at. You don't know me. When you look, so you reckon, okay, I mean, how do I maneuver? The only way to maneuver for me then was to say, look, I have to understand the history of this place. And I have to understand the impact that capitalism has on these people. And with that, it becomes very individualistic. It's everyone for themselves. They don't care about the other person. And that is the reason why they may behave in that way, because the leaders demand so much of life that these people really don't have it to give. So they become very bitter and, callous and cold and everything in one. Everything in one. It's not different. It is not that different from Jamaica, but in Jamaica, we are more friendly and we are more open. We are more, we share more. We like to call and, yo, me I cook some food, dumpling and mackerel, come over and, right, you don't get that here, But it is just to put them in sequential fashion to understand that, okay, I had to be a part of all of these things in order to be where I'm at now. I have an understanding of it, and that is very important. That word, understanding, is very important to understand, because what you have to do is separate yourself from it and just observe. And that was what I had to do.
Listen, what you just said a while ago, I literally wrote down a question. I said, this is what I want to focus on. And then you mentioned about the high level of insecurity in the US. And then when you talk about separate yourself from it, how do people separate themselves as something that is so ingrained in their daily life? And, it's how do you get people to pause? But first question, high level of insecurity about what? What's the high level of insecurity that you notice?
The insecurity is within themselves. It's the oppression, the oppressiveness, the beating down, whether they're getting it from school or they're getting it from their environment, maybe from home. It is very engraved within them, so they become very bitter. You can't conversate with them. You can't look at them with what you're looking at. It has to be coming from somewhere. It's not like us in Jamaica when somebody is looking at us, we automatically may give a smile and think that, yo, he like me or she like me. They don't think like that here. It's like, yo, whatsoever you're looking at. It's very defensive and cold. But then I understand the terminology when some people are xenophobic, and maybe they are just in that realm where that fear that has been instilled in them not to trust anyone, not to take anyone lightly, and we can see that in the politics too, how they try to use homonyms to discredit a person's character. So they are creating that mistrust, and it gets spilled over in society. It makes them feel comfortable having that form of distrust. It gives them like we would say, some people just love to hate. Yeah. They don't know why they're hating, but they just love to hate. And that is what I saw here. I mean, I don't dislike them, but the behavior is a cause for concern 99.9% of the time. So I had to separate myself from that, because remember, one of the first things, Mr. Fisher, Ulrich Fisher, big respect, he was a physics teacher, and he said to me, one of the first laws of physics is it doesn't matter how positive you are. If you are around negative, you are going to become negative. And a lot of people try to think like that doesn't make sense, but it does. Because if you look at the car battery, and I'm breaking this down now in theory, if you look at the car battery, the negative charge is the most important charge on the battery.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see where the physics work. Because if the negative does not try to become positive, the car will not start. It will not start whatsoever. That is how important the negative is. So we have to be careful and be aware of ourselves in order not to accept, because these negatives can really seep into your mind unconsciously and you become that person.
Yeah. Before we come on this call and I was talking to a friend, I said, you know what? This is the power of this, this thing, because after you're done make your commitment, you find yourself a pull back in because they do certain things, and there's the grass look green up on the other side, but you still have to water it. You have to mow the lawn. You have to make sure your neighbor not have weeds enough for them backyard, because the weeds can get to a coming off for your backyard. So even if you tend to the grass, you cut it, and you put whatever you need to do to make your weed be gone on your thing. If your neighbor, especially here in New York when backyards are close together, if the neighbor not treat for them backyard with the same level of care that you are, the weeds are going to come under the fence and start coming out your yard.
Yes, man.
So the question I wanted to ask you, two things came to mind. There's this book called Steal Like an Artist. And I'm going to tell you why I bring it up, right? How can we find the artists within? And I don't mean artists, people you have to go out and start do artwork like Mark or paint, right? If that's what you can do it. I encourage you to do whatever. But the artist within, I'm talking that creative spirit, because when I found that creative energy, I realized that I had this creative side of me, because a lot of times growing up, being an artist wasn't something that was nurtured, and everybody could be Cecil or Edna or whoever else, right? But it wasn't necessarily nurtured. So how can we tap into our creativity, that artist within, whether it is whatever creative work you want to do? And the reason why I say steal like an artist, a lot of times, and this is a lot of, again, from the cues we got growing up, right? Don't copy what somebody else do. Somebody else already do that. Find something else to do. And so there was this book called Steal Like an Artist, which basically said all of the artworks were inspired by other people. So there's a difference between the labeling of copycat, because there's such a thing, versus inspired by. So how can we nurture that creative spirit and not be insecure that it's like when you started out, you weren't the person you are now. So how do we keep that insecurity at bay? What do we need to do, to get more positive charge? Let's talk a little bit about, because what you're saying and what I'm taking from this is having a creative balance. You were able to, you had the creative outlet, but you had all of these very stimulating intellectual experiences, and balancing both of them to have really a full experience. So how can we tap more into that creativity, nurture it, no worry about it or be too insecure about it, so we can grow and blossom, and then figure out how we can put some of that in our pitney and people around us?
Right. One of the first things is to get away the ego. That is one of the first things. I don't know how to tell someone to get away from the ego. I don't know, because
give me an example of an ego get away. Like what kind of ego? Like give me an example of a thinking that's the ego and you need to.
Okay. In order for my art teacher, I'm going to use him as a reference. He always said to me, your work needs to be so good, it must not have an ego. And I was like, okay, teach, what do you mean by that? He said, your work needs to be so good to the point where even if your name is not on it, somebody can look at it and say, that is a Mark Anthony Hill. It has to be that good. The only way you're going to achieve that, you have to get the ego out. And the ego was the name, because the name is our first form of identity. And plenty artists revel in that. The minute they get famous, they just do some crap and they sign their name on it, and that is what you're paying for. And that is also within clothing, and that is also within anything else pertaining to fashion. You're paying for the name. That is their ego. So they are not making it good anymore. because of the ego. So I had to get rid of that, the ego. So when I do the work, my ego is out of it. I just follow where the paint goes and where the brush goes. I just follow. I don't question it. I just follow. And I'm going to say, no. This not supposed to go here. So no, I just flow with it because the ego is not on my left shoulder anymore. I am a normal person now. So I had to work on that. And then the understanding of yourself. You have to understand yourself. Whether you are a warmonger, you have to understand what is creating this war path within me. And if you're a peacemaker, you have to understand what is creating this peaceful path within me. So the understanding of self is also very important. And then you apply that with the belief of having confidence in your ability. The minute you can do all three, then there is no reason to even bother or to wonder why people will say this or will say that. Because we all have to understand, whatsoever answer we are getting from a particular person or an individual, that is the answer that they would have bestowed in whatsoever it is they're doing. So they're just giving you their part to say, well, you're selling a work for $35,000. What makes you believe you're going to get $35,000 for it? Because I know that there is a buyer out there who is willing to spend $70,000 for it. And I believe in my product. So oftentimes, if you're not believing in your product, you're going to devalue yourself. And the devaluation of yourself will project into everything else. So we all have to put everything in one basket. Then we compartmentalize and break them down in theory. So I can speak for me in terms of doing that. It wasn't easy because I have to go back in something what they call corrective script. So when you're going through any form of trauma or what we would call counseling, that is one of the first aspects of the counseling. The counselor will go to the corrective script because they're going to go back to see where this insecurity came from or where this, right. So that was also very important for me as well in order to get somebody to understand that, look, these are the necessary steps you will have to take. And I can tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy. And it's very emotional because you're going back to rehash a lot of negatives, a lot of things you believe you should have seen, but for some apparent reason you didn't. And you will tend to hold yourself responsible for it.
Yeah.
Right. Know. Because one of the easiest things to do is to forgive others. One of the hardest things to do is to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So it's a procession. It's not just one thing. It's a procession, you know? It worked for me. So I can only say, well, Kerry, this is what works for me. You can try it. It may not work for you, but that does not mean you're not going to achieve what is it you want to achieve. Because we all know 3 plus 3 is 6, but so does 5 plus 1. We just reach 6, right. We just reach it differently, but it will have the same outcome in the long run.
And on top of that, on top of what you're saying too, it's the time. So you just made a list of certain things, but it is the reality that this takes time. And when you say time, time means a lot of things. For you, it could have been 5 years. For some, it might be longer, shorter. And I think we're trying to race to this point because we feel like once we get to this point, then we can get to another point. And from everything that you've seen, all of these experiences are interconnected. The lessons boil over into another experience. And I think sometimes it's very hard to really grasp how important time is and to be kind to ourselves, to let the process take its time. You can't turn up the fire, like I was talking to my brother-in-law and we're talking about my niece baking a cake. And him say, she turn up the stove like you go cook the something faster. Yeah, we cook it faster, but you're not going to cook it good,
Yeah.
And that's important. You can turn up the fire, make it hot, and we cook fast. But will the chicken fry all the way through that, when you cut into it, it's properly cooked. And I think going back to your point of, the age that we live in, and in America, everything is fast. We want it quick. We don't always want to spend the time doing the corrective script because I will heap of work. And
it's a lot of work.
And even
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and to unpack, and then for everything you unpack, you have to unpack the things that bubble up a little bit more before you can go unpack the next thing. So it's a lot of work, but I'm really enjoying this conversation because, you know, a lot of times we just move through life and we
unaware.
Yes. So unaware. And I'm at a point where I'm trying to just pause and just just be still for a little bit, because you're so busy moving that you're just reacting. And when I feel like I'm reacting, it's like me no know myself anymore. So I just want to be still and be conscious of what is happening. Like, be conscious of what I'm saying, being conscious of the things that I'm doing, and being okay with it, because like somebody said, I have to live with it. And the ego parts we talk about, I think that's going to be the hardest thing, because I can easily say, no, me not do that because I don't want my name associated with that. And in terms of quality, right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about people that have put out things out there just for the sake of putting it out, explain a little bit about the difference between, well, this is my brand and I want a good quality brand, and so I'm not going to put my name on a subpar quality product, versus somebody says,
I can give you
an example.
I can give you a perfect example. Perfect. And this is real. That is the reason why you have to believe in yourself and what is it you're doing. Because people who make it in life, they place value on their journey. It's very important. It is the journey that they are looking at. And if they recognize that you're not going to take your own journey, then why would they believe in you or your product? It's an automatic turn off. No. This artist, not going to say his name, he did an exhibition in Boston. And this lady came there. Simple looking lady. But she was very wealthy. And he had a work there that she loved dearly. And he wanted $4,000 for the work. The lady took the work and wrote him a check for $40,000. And he, within himself, looked at the check when the lady was leaving. And he called her back and he said, "Ma'am, you have made a mistake. I said $4,000 and you gave me 40. The lady took back the check, ripped it up, gave him back the artwork, and said, "If it's only for $4,000, then it can't be that good." And now this is where we're at again. The importance of believing in yourself. And because he didn't believe in himself, he sold himself short. And she decided that, look, I don't want it. If you don't believe in your own craft, then I don't want it. So it's very important. If you know within yourself that, listen, this is what I want. I can give you umpteens of stories. In 1958, Robert Rauschenberg sold a painting for $900 US. Now in 1958, $900 US is a lot of money. However, he sold it to a billionaire, Robert Scull. Now the Sculls were billionaires because they were the ones who controlled the taxi industry. Only for Robert Rauschenberg to find out that Mr. Scull bought the work for $900 and he placed it on an auction and got $85,000 for it. Now, what created that problem? Robert Rauschenberg didn't believe in himself. So he sold himself short. And then he went to the auction and physically abused Mr. Scull. So these are the things that we can look at and learn from it. We have to place value not only in our product, but if the value is there within yourself, it is going to follow you. And people will treat you according.
Yeah.
But if you're going to sell yourself short, then come on now. You can't expect them to look at you with value. Come on now. Whatever you're doing, even your talk show, it's not for everyone, but you still have to maintain that value, because you're going to have that little niche of maybe 2, 3, 4 million followers who understand your value and they like you. But you may have a next 100 million who don't, and it is okay. But you still can't allow the majority who don't have the value in your stuff to overpower your thinking for you to say, you know what, I think I need to scale down. Then that means you have lost.
Mm-hmm.
You have lost. As Marcus Garvey would have said, if you have no confidence in yourself, you're twice defeated in the race of life. But with confidence, you have won before the race even started. That is some powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to create that value. You have to push yourself in that valuable, as that valuable product that you know this is not your want to have. You need to have this. It's a matter of need.
Yeah.
This is what I'm offering. This is what I'm pushing out. This is what I'm giving. This is why my product is the best.
Yeah.
This is why what I'm doing is the best. You have to have that. I'm not saying to be arrogant with it, but you have to find that balance to understand that value takes time. The most important thing, well, I wouldn't say the most important thing. One of the most important things you have said since we are having this conversation, people need to understand that if you allow time to take its course, it will work.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So even though your stuff is valuable, it's not going to grow overnight, but I guarantee you, within 4 to 5 years, you're going to see the benefits.
Yeah.
Because the value is taking its rightful course now.
Yeah.
It's moving. Everyone is now understanding.
Right. It's like I was, another person I was talking to, and my collaborator, I said, we're playing a long game. We're not doing an thing for overnight success. You're playing a long game because you know that
beautiful.
You keep putting in the work. The other day I shared an article or something that was done about me, and I said, 5 years I've been doing this and I've just been putting in the work. I keep doing it over and over again because I believe what I'm going. I know why I wanted to start it. I know why I'm continuing it. I know I'm not doing this to get rich if I get money from it, but I'm going to continue. So I know what I'm doing, and I know that because I'm playing a long game, I approach things differently. I am not, my family's health insurance and my family's survival isn't dependent on this. This is my creative survival.
Right,
and I know that in order for my creativity to live, I got to keep nurturing this thing, because my first episode to this episode, whichever number it ends up being, is a completely different episode because I've grown so much over the years. And because of that growth, I'm able to do so many other things that at this onset of this, I would not have thought that I would be doing. And that is the beauty of the process. You learn other things and pick up other skills in the process that, I never think of. You go in and say, oh, I'm going to start this podcast, and this is what you thought of. But on the way, Mark, I promise you, there's so many things that I've picked up along the way that I never saw as some things that I would learn or be able to do just because I say I want to start a podcast. And so, like I said, I know that time and you get distracted because, like you say, everybody on social media and everybody's doing this, and you look at everyone else's highlight reel because you can't avoid it because it's social media. But it comes back to, why are you really doing this? And what kind of game are you playing? Are you playing a long game? And if you're playing a long game, you just have to just stay in your lane. If you're the 100-meter, you go fast like you saying, but are you doing the marathon? Or you do steeplechase? Usain can't do no steeplechase. So it's really knowing the race that you're in.
You're in, see? And then it come back to the same thing, the understanding. If you want to have that understanding of yourself and what is it you're about, believe me, because you ask plenty people these things, do you understand themselves? And they will tell you yes. And then they'll do something totally crazy, and then you'll be like, okay, okay, cool.
No, but it goes back to, the positive and negative charge and how much, if you ever see like somewhere in some movie, somebody's in a crowd of people and they can't really move on their own because they're moving with a crowd. And even if you want to go or make your own way because you're in this massive crowd, you have no choice. Or even a better example, the birds, when they're in a flock, the birds fly one way, they all follow, and they fly in this formation. So which one of the birds are going to break out and fly in one different formation? It's very hard. And so, when I talked about, stopping, there's a self-awareness that we have to, at some point, realize that, okay, we've been moving unconsciously. We, even in our conscious state, and can we pause and see what we're doing mindlessly, following some method or pattern that we need to stop before we can move on? Because I think that's the first step. Like I said, I know when you're so busy and you're getting caught up in the day to day, and you realize, no man, the day I get away from him, I need to stop a little bit and see what I just do. Well, on there. And it takes that. And if we can't do that, we're going to keep making decisions on autopilot because we don't take time to pause and reflect on what we're doing. Reflection. And part of being an artist too, which is kind of why creativity is so important. There's an aspect of reflection that happens that we don't get taught how to be reflective, because I love silence. You see, after me done talk to you, I go sit down and I just not go say nothing for the rest of the day. I like silence. I like sitting by myself. I like being in thought. And culturally, that's not something a lot of us can do or encouraged to do. Right? Yes. We need to always be around somebody. We need to always be engaging with someone. Yes, we are social creatures, but we also need to take the time to reflect. Because if we don't reflect, we can't learn from the mistakes that we've done, like little mistakes. And then how do we improve on that and move forward? And, the moments of reflection happens over a period of time, and we have to meet with the therapist and go through our corrective script, because we don't take smaller pauses throughout the courses of our days, weeks, months, and years to reflect on behavior. And then by the time we get to a certain point, it becomes so damaging to ourselves. So I really enjoy this conversation, because I think what you have shown is that we talked about on the onset, you're either reinventing or you're evolving.
Yes.
And how you evolve, you're shedding an old way of life. You take the experience with you, but you don't operate the same. You don't operate the same.
Right.
At a higher level.
Because it's still with us,
Of course it is.
The old way is still with us. So what we're trying to do with the old way is to gain control of it. We are trying to gain control of the old way so it doesn't interfere with the process of where we want to go, or on the journey of where we want to go. But we are aware of it and we have control of it. It's very important, because plenty people cannot shake the person who they were. They can't, and it interferes with everything. Again, I may understand that position, so I may speak to them differently, knowing that they are struggling to really and truly become what they would want to call better, or for lack of better word, whatever they want to call it. I may understand, and it may not affect me because I understand. So I always try to make it be known that, look, I was once at their position. I know the struggle. It just happened that I conquered it. They may not conquer it, but I still have that understanding and patience, in order to deal with whatsoever may come. I try not to fight stuff, Kerry. Put it that way. If I get a ticket, I don't worry about it. I just pay it.
Yeah.
That is me. And it works for me to accept things as they are. The acceptance is also another. There are many stages. There are so many stages, because I am trying to reach the onion. I want to become that onion. There is a why. Because the onion is the only vegetable that has so much layers. You can peel it off and peel it off and peel it off. And every layer has the potential to make you cry. So that is my thing. I want to be that onion. Whether it's a cry of joy or it is a cry of sadness, because maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I can forgive myself and move on, and I learn from it and say, okay, I'm not going to say that again, and we move on. So that is my aim, to be that onion.
Yeah, because we talk about this yesterday. There's a lot of things that we hold on to that we should let go.
Yes.
We have to let some of those things go, because to your point, they get in the way of where we want to go. So we
to
have to
go.
get control of
Yes,
it.
yes. We have to get control. It's all about control. We are aware of it. We have not forgotten about it, but we have control of the situation. And that is very important, you know. Control of self is very important.
Yes, yes, it is. So as we wrap up, anyone listening to this episode, what is 2 things of all the things we said? What are 2 things you want people to come away with and move forward in their life? What are 2 key pieces of advice you want to give?
It is okay to be yourself, and it is also okay to know what you're about. Those are the 2. It may sound similar, but it is not the same.
It's okay
to be yourself, and it is okay to know what you're about.
What's the difference?
Mr. Clark told me that years ago. It took me a while to figure it out, but I did. You know, that is something that the listeners will take with themselves and they'll figure it out.
Okay.
I can't tell them. He didn't tell me.
He didn't tell you, but that's the thing.
No.
You have to figure it out.
I figured it out, and I went back to him and I said, I got it. I unlocked it. And he was like, what? And I told him, and he was like, you know, I'm glad you came back. You know, I'm glad. And then that proves that nothing goes through one ear and goes through the other.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It's okay to be yourself, but it's okay too to know what is it you're about.
Yeah.
Trust me. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, mega panda it. Mega panda. Powerful
stuff. Yeah, powerful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have the
first one I'm good with. Because I've been processing this a lot for the last, you know. The second one, me think me know that, but mega panda it. And if you think you know, it's gonna keep refining and iterate.
Okay. There you go.
You move through, cause
there you go.
Yeah, me get it. Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you for being a guest on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love, you know, the evolution. I love the story. I love the transition because, you know, and something for the audience. Yes, he's an artist, but the story was just all the more captivating. That's where the good nuggets are, the push and pull of life and the tension and the struggles. That's where the beauty comes from. You know, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with me. And good luck. I say good luck because you say you value your work. Congrats on the artwork at the Harlem. What's the event again? Renaissance.
Yeah.
And you know, much success in the future. I'm extremely happy for you, and we'll catch up. All right. And until next time, walk good. You've been listening to Carry On Friends, a show about the Caribbean American experience. We post new episodes every 2 weeks. And if you want to learn more, buy merchandise, or sign up for our newsletter, check out our website, carryonfriends.com. The Carry On Friends podcast is produced by Breadfruit Media, and new episodes are available every other Tuesday morning. You can listen to the podcast on the website, carryonfriends.com, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you like to listen to your podcast.